The world feels normal today. But it wasn't always this way. Somewhere on this planet, something once moved through shadow and fog. Silent paws on cold earth. Yellow eyes watching from the trees. It breathed. It hunted. It survived. Ice ages came and went. Predators rose and vanished. The land itself reshaped. And still, it lived. Until we arrived. This is the story of the Tasmanian tiger. An animal that survived nature's worst trials. But did not survive human fear, greed, and ignorance. By the time we noticed the silence, it had already been hunted into history. Stay with me. Because this extinction was not a mystery. It was a decision. The Tasmanian tiger, scientifically known as Thylacine cynocephalus, was not a tiger at all. It was a marsupial mammal. A distant cousin of kangaroos and koalas. Yet shaped by evolution to resemble a dog. This was no coincidence. It was convergence. Nature solving the same problem twice. For tens of thousands of years. The thylacine filled the role of a top land predator. Across mainland Australia, Tasmania, and New Guinea. But by the time Europeans arrived, its range had already collapsed. On mainland Australia, the arrival of dingoes, brought by humans thousands of years earlier, pushed the thylacine south. By the 1800s, its last stronghold was Tasmania. An island of dense forests, open grasslands, rugged mountains, and mist-covered valleys. A final refuge. Or so it seemed. Physically, the thylacine was unmistakable. It had a slender, dog-like body. A stiff, balancing tail. Short sandy-brown fur. And most haunting of all, 13 to 21 dark stripes running across its lower back and hindquarters. Those stripes earned it the name. Tasmanian tiger. Adults measured up to 1.8 meters, 6 feet, from nose to tail, and weighed between 15 and 30 kilograms. It walked with a stiff, deliberate gait. Its jaws could open wider than any dog, nearly 120 degrees, revealing powerful crushing teeth designed for bone. To early European settlers, it looked like a wolf, and that single misunderstanding would become a death sentence. The thylacine was first formally described by Western science in 1808. But Aboriginal Tasmanians had known it for thousands of years, hunting alongside it, coexisting without erasing it. They did not wipe it out. That would come later, much later, and much faster, because once humans labeled it a threat, facts no longer mattered. In life, the Tasmanian tiger was not the monster it was made out to be. It was solitary, shy, avoidant of humans. Unlike wolves, it did not hunt in large coordinated packs. Most evidence suggests it hunted alone or in small family units, using patience rather than aggression. Its diet consisted primarily of wallabies, pademelons, birds, reptiles, and small mammals. It was an ambush predator, relying on stealth, cover, and endurance, not speed. The thylacine would stalk its prey slowly, sometimes over long distances, until the moment was right. It was not built for explosive chases. It was built to outlast. This mattered, because it meant something crucial. It was not well adapted to attacking livestock. Sheep are fast. Open fields favor speed and numbers. Yet when sheep began disappearing from farms, humans needed a culprit. And the thylacine, rare, unfamiliar, striped, silent, became the perfect villain. In truth, most livestock losses were caused by wild dogs, feral dogs, disease, and poor fencing. But evidence never stopped fear. And fear never stopped a gun. By nature, the thylacine was reclusive. It avoided open confrontation. It avoided people. Which meant when humans hunted it, it did not fight back. That shyness, that quiet nature, that evolutionary success in avoiding conflict, would be twisted into weakness and exploited. But let me ask you something. If you had lived in that time, knowing what we know now, would you have tried to save them? Or would you have believed the stories, picked up a rifle, and called it protection? Extinction is not always sudden. Sometimes, it happens quietly. One birth that never occurs. One litter that never survives. One season with no young at all. For the Tasmanian tiger, reproduction was never abundant. It was slow. Deliberately slow. A pace refined by evolution in a stable ecosystem. An ecosystem humans would shatter almost overnight. Female thylacines gave birth to 2 to 4 joeys, rarely more. Like all marsupials, They were born tiny, blind, hairless, barely formed. They crawled instinctively into the mother's pouch, where they would remain for months, entirely dependent. This was not a species designed for rapid recovery. Gestation lasted only about 30 days. But survival depended on something far more fragile. Time. Time to nurse. Time to grow. Time to learn. Young thylacines stayed with their mother for many months, sometimes close to a year, before becoming independent. Parental investment was high. Loss of an adult female meant the loss of every offspring she carried. And humans didn't just kill randomly. They killed adults. The largest. The most visible. The breeders. Every bounty paid was not one death. It was 4 future generations erased. By the time settlers noticed the numbers falling, the damage was already mathematical. Low birth rates. High adult mortality. No immigration. No refuge. This was not decline. This was inevitability, engineered by human pressure. And once populations dropped below a certain threshold, even stopping the killing would not have saved them. But humans didn't stop. They accelerated. In the Tasmanian ecosystem, the Tasmanian tiger occupied a critical role. It was an apex predator. Not the most aggressive. Not the most numerous. But the most stabilizing. It kept herbivore populations in check. It removed the weak and the sick. It shaped behavior, forcing prey to move, hide, adapt. When predators disappear, ecosystems unravel. But before that could happen, another predator arrived. Humans. At first, the thylacine had no natural enemies in Tasmania. No dingoes. No large competing carnivores. Only balance. Then European settlers arrived in the early 1800s, bringing with them sheep, guns, traps, and fear. Suddenly, every dead animal needed a culprit. The thylacine was different. Striped. Unfamiliar. Easy to blame. Never mind that scientific evidence, even later, showed thylacines were poorly suited to killing sheep. Never mind that feral dogs were widespread. Never mind that poor land management accounted for massive livestock losses. Facts were irrelevant. Fear spreads faster than truth. And once fear enters politics, policy follows. The thylacine became a competitor, not for food, but for permission to exist. Humans declared ownership over the land, the animals on it, and the rules of survival. The thylacine had no vote, no voice, only a body to be counted. When killing became official policy, this is where the story stops being tragic and becomes criminal. By the mid-1800s, Tasmanian settlers were no longer just killing thylacines. They were being paid to do it. The Tasmanian government introduced bounty programs. Official, documented incentives for extermination. For every thylacine killed, a payment was issued. Not whispered. Not hidden. Written into policy. Between 1888 and 1909, thousands of bounties were paid. Thousands. Each one signed. Stamped. Approved. This was not ignorance. This was administration. And the pressure didn't stop there. Habitat loss fragmented hunting grounds. Trapping killed indiscriminately. Poisoning campaigns wiped out prey species. Introduced diseases, likely carried by dogs, weakened survivors. The thylacine was attacked from every direction at once. Numbers collapsed. Sightings became rare. Breeding slowed further. But instead of stopping, humans pushed harder. Because rarity did not inspire protection. It inspired trophies. Zoos captured the last survivors. Not to save them, but to display them. Even in captivity, they were neglected. Poor diets. Small enclosures. No breeding programs. The final insult came quietly. In 1936, the last known thylacine died. Alone in a concrete enclosure at Hobart Zoo. Locked out of shelter. On a cold night. No keeper noticed. No report written. No urgency. Just silence. But here is the most damning truth of all. Protection laws were passed, too late. In 1936, the same year the last thylacine died, it was finally granted legal protection. The ink dried. After the species was already gone. This was not bad luck. This was delay, negligence, and denial. When denial outlived the species, extinction rarely arrives with ceremony. There is no final announcement. No global alarm. It happens quietly. Between paperwork. Between excuses. Between maybe tomorrow. By the early 1900s, the Tasmanian tiger was already functionally doomed. Populations had collapsed across Tasmania. Sightings became sporadic, isolated, desperate. Yet humans refused to stop hunting, because admitting the truth would have meant admitting guilt. Bounty records tell the story plainly. For decades, the Tasmanian government paid citizens to deliver dead thylacines, skins, bodies, proof. Even as numbers plummeted, payments continued. Rarity did not trigger protection. It triggered urgency to kill the last ones before someone else claimed the reward. By the 1920s, thylacines were almost never seen in the wild. But instead of emergency conservation, humans chose denial. Reports were dismissed. Warnings ignored. Scientists sidelined. Zoos became the final holding cells. Captured animals were not paired for breeding. No genetic management. No urgency. Just display. The last confirmed living thylacine died on September 7, 1936. At Hobart Zoo. Its name was never officially recorded. That alone tells you everything. On a cold Tasmanian night, it was locked outside its sleeping shelter. Exposure killed it. Not a gun. Not a trap. Neglect. The species ended. Not with a hunt, but with indifference. And still, humans hesitated to admit what they had done. 4 decades after 1936, hope became an excuse. Unconfirmed sightings. Blurry photos. Footprints. Each rumor bought humanity time. Time to avoid responsibility. It was not until 1986, 50 years after the last known death, that scientists officially declared the Tasmanian tiger extinct. Half a century of delay. Not because evidence was missing, but because accountability was uncomfortable. An entire species was erased, and humans argued over paperwork. This is the question that matters most. Could the Tasmanian tiger have been saved? The answer is not complicated. Yes. Absolutely. Unquestionably. By the late 1800s, all the tools already existed. Legal protection, bounty removal, habitat preservation, captive breeding programs. None required advanced technology. Only will. But will never came. Warnings were issued early. Naturalists raised alarms. Population declines were documented. Governments responded with delay. When protection finally arrived in 1936, it arrived after extinction. A symbolic gesture. A meaningless law. Captive breeding could have worked if it had started even 10 years earlier. But zoos treated thylacines as exhibits, not as a species on the brink. No coordinated breeding. No genetic planning. No urgency. And perhaps the most damning failure of all, humans never stopped to ask if the original accusation was even true. Modern analysis shows thylacines were unlikely major sheep predators. They were blamed because they were convenient. They were killed because they were defenseless. Extinction did not happen because humans lacked knowledge. It happened because knowledge was ignored. And that is not tragedy. That is choice. Today, the forests of Tasmania still stand. Wind moves through eucalyptus leaves. Mist settles over valleys at dawn. Wallabies still pause at the tree line. Alert, listening. But something is missing. Once, a striped shadow moved here. Not loudly. Not violently. Quietly. The Tasmanian tiger did not roar. It did not dominate through noise or numbers. It existed through balance. And when it vanished, there was no explosion. No final scream. Just a gap. An empty role in the ecosystem that no species has ever fully replaced. Predator and prey fell out of rhythm. Human control replaced natural order. The land changed. Subtly, permanently. Some say extinction is just nature. That species come and go. But the thylacine did not fade over millennia. It was erased in a human lifetime. Children were born, grew old, and died. All while the last thylacines were hunted, captured, neglected, and forgotten. There are no thylacines left to forgive us. Only photographs, scratched film reels, and grainy black and white footage of an animal pacing a concrete cage, unaware it was the last of its kind. No warning label was placed on its death. No memorial was built when it ended. Only later did we decide it mattered. Today, people still report sightings. Still hope. Still search. But hope, now, is not for the animal. It is for us. Because the real question was never whether the Thylacine could survive. It did. For tens of thousands of years. The question is whether we can change. Before silence claims another name. If we fail to remember what we took from this world, then extinction will not be the past. It will be the future. One last question. If the Tasmanian tiger were still alive today, what would the world look like differently?